The sun was just starting to rise over the lake, casting a golden glow across the water, and the small wooden dock jutted out like a quiet invitation to anyone who wanted to enjoy the peace of the morning. For years it had been a sanctuary. The homeowner had spent countless hours there, sitting with a cup of coffee, dipping toes in the cool water, or simply letting the world drift away as the gentle waves lapped against the shore. It was more than just wood and nails. It was a place full of memories, laughter, and quiet moments that had helped shape their life. That morning had started like any other. The air was crisp, the birds were singing, and a soft breeze carried the scent of the water. The homeowner had planned to spend the morning fishing, hoping to catch a few for dinner. As they walked down the familiar path to the dock, they noticed something unusual. A car was parked at the edge of their property, far too close for comfort. And standing at the very end of the dock, holding a clipboard and papers in her hand, was Karen. Karen had lived nearby for several years. She was known in the neighborhood for being fiercely territorial, always ready to argue about property lines, HOA rules, or even the tiniest things like where someone could park or place a garden gnome. Most people avoided getting into disputes with her because she had a reputation for pushing hard and rarely backing down. But no one had ever seen her at this particular dock before. "Good morning," the homeowner called out, trying to keep the tone friendly, hoping it was some kind of misunderstanding. Karen didn't respond. She was too focused on her papers, scanning them like she had just discovered a hidden treasure or a secret right to the dock. The homeowner stepped closer, feeling a mix of confusion and irritation. "Karen, what are you doing on my dock?" they asked. "This is private property." Karen finally looked up, her eyes narrowing. "Actually," she said, her voice sharp and confident, "this dock is on my property. You've been using it without permission, and that has to stop." The homeowner blinked in disbelief. "What do you mean? This dock has been here for decades. I've owned this property longer than you've lived in the neighborhood. Look at the records, the old maps, the surveys." "It's mine," Karen waved a hand dismissively. "I've seen the survey. Trust me, you're mistaken. It's part of my lot now. You're going to have to remove your things and stay off." The homeowner felt a surge of frustration. They had never been confronted like this before. They had always known their rights, but this bold claim was unlike anything they had faced. Standing on their own dock with their memories and mornings and quiet moments literally under dispute felt absurd. Yet here was Karen, asserting ownership as if it was fact. Trying to stay calm, the homeowner asked, "Do you have any proof that this dock belongs to you?" Karen held up the papers like they were evidence of victory. "These are the official property documents," she said. "They show the boundaries clearly. You'll see it's mine." The homeowner took a deep breath. They had seen plenty of people make claims without facts, but Karen's confidence made it hard not to doubt. Still, they knew the truth. They remembered the dock being built when they were a child, stories from their parents, neighbors' memories, even photographs of family gatherings there. They remembered summers of swimming, evenings of fishing, and quiet mornings watching the mist rise from the water. This wasn't just a dock. It was part of their life. "Karen," they said firmly, "I'm not trying to start a fight, but this dock belongs to my family. You can't just claim it. We can look at the records together. We can talk to the surveyor if you want, but you are wrong." Karen's expression hardened. "I don't need to talk. You need to get off my property. If you don't, I'll take legal action. And I can promise you I'll win. You won't be able to use this dock anymore." The homeowner felt a mix of anger and disbelief. They had always believed that common sense and fairness would guide most disputes, but this was different. Karen wasn't just asserting a claim. She was trying to rewrite history, to make everyone believe something that wasn't true. Over the next few hours, the homeowner tried everything. They showed Karen the survey maps, old photographs of family gatherings, even spoke with neighbors who remembered the dock being part of the property long before Karen arrived. Each time Karen shook her head and insisted she was correct, her confidence never wavering. It became clear that logic and proof weren't going to change her mind. After Karen left, muttering threats about lawyers and court, the homeowner felt a sinking feeling. How could one person be so certain of something so wrong? The dock, their dock, suddenly felt like a battleground instead of a sanctuary. They spent the rest of the morning walking along the shoreline, trying to think of a plan. The idea of having to fight for something that had always been theirs was exhausting, but they also knew they couldn't give in. Over the next few days, the tension grew. Karen began showing up more often, sometimes sitting at the edge of the dock with her clipboard, sometimes taking measurements or pointing things out to friends as if they were witnesses to her claim. The homeowner kept a journal, noting every visit, every word, every strange action. They realized they were in for a long battle, one that wasn't just about ownership, but about standing their ground and protecting what was theirs. Despite the stress, the homeowner also noticed something important. The dock had brought people together. Neighbors would stop by, sometimes to offer support, sometimes just to see what was happening. People shared their own stories, confirming the history of the dock and showing that the homeowner wasn't alone. That support became a small light in a situation that otherwise felt tense and heavy. One evening, sitting on the dock as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in orange and pink, the homeowner thought about all the mornings they had spent here. They remembered their own parents teaching them how to fish, the laughter of children playing by the water, the quiet peace of early mornings when the world seemed still. That dock was more than wood and nails. It was a part of life, of memories, of identity, and they weren't about to let someone take that away. The homeowner knew they had to approach this carefully. Karen was bold, and legal battles could be long and draining. But they also realized that giving in would feel like losing a piece of themselves. So they made a plan: document everything, gather all proof, and be ready for anything. Photographs, maps, surveys, neighbors' testimonies, all of it would serve as armor against Karen's claims. The first part of the conflict ended not with a resolution, but with a determination. The dock remained theirs for now, but the battle lines had been drawn. Karen had claimed ownership, and the homeowner had refused to back down. It was the beginning of a struggle that would test patience, resilience, and the ability to deal with someone who believed she could bend the truth to her will. And as the moon rose over the lake that night, casting silver light on the calm waters, the homeowner sat on the dock, remembering all the mornings and evenings spent there. They knew one thing for certain: no matter how bold Karen was, no matter how many threats she made, this dock had been theirs long before she arrived, and they weren't going to let her take it without a fight. After the first confrontation at the dock, the homeowner thought the situation might settle on its own. They hoped that Karen would realize her claim was baseless and simply leave the matter alone. But days turned into a week, and Karen's actions grew bolder. She began showing up at unexpected times, sometimes early in the morning when the homeowner was still having coffee on the porch, and sometimes late in the evening when the lake was quiet and the sunset reflected on the water. Each visit was the same: her clipboard in hand, her eyes scanning the dock as if she was inspecting something she already owned. It wasn't just the presence that was frustrating, it was the way she acted. Karen seemed determined to assert ownership not only for herself but in front of anyone who might witness it. She would call over friends or neighbors who had no idea about the history of the dock and explain to them loudly and confidently that the dock was part of her property. Some of these people nodded politely, unaware of the full story, while others looked uncomfortable. The homeowner felt like their peaceful sanctuary was being invaded, not just physically but socially. It was exhausting to deal with someone who seemed willing to rewrite reality for her own benefit. One morning, the homeowner decided to confront Karen directly, hoping a calm conversation could clear the air. They walked down to the dock with copies of old maps, survey records, and photographs that dated back decades. Karen was already there, pacing back and forth, muttering to herself, occasionally glancing at the papers she had brought. "Karen," the homeowner called out, holding the documents carefully. "I brought these so we can look at the history of this dock together. I want to resolve this without conflict." Karen didn't even pause. "I don't need to look at anything. The dock is on my property. You need to leave it alone." The homeowner took a deep breath, trying not to let frustration take over. "Look at these records. This shows that the dock has been part of my property for decades. You can see the surveys, the photographs, everything." Karen waved the documents away. "I don't care what these old papers say. The law is on my side. You're trespassing." It was clear that logic would not win here. Karen wasn't listening to facts. She was determined to believe her version of reality. The homeowner realized that calm conversations weren't enough. If they wanted to protect their dock, they needed to prepare for a more serious battle. Over the next few days, the homeowner began documenting everything meticulously. They took photographs of the dock from multiple angles, noting any marks, damages, or changes. They gathered old photographs of family gatherings, fishing trips, and summer afternoons spent by the water. Every detail mattered. They also spoke with neighbors, quietly and respectfully, asking if anyone remembered the history of the dock. Many did, recalling family picnics, evening swims, and children learning to fish. Some neighbors expressed sympathy, but others were hesitant to get involved, not wanting to provoke Karen. Karen, however, seemed oblivious to the support the homeowner was gathering. She continued her visits, sometimes pacing on the dock for hours, other times taking measurements or making notes as if she were preparing for some kind of inspection. One afternoon, she even brought a ladder and began adjusting the railing, claiming it needed maintenance. The homeowner approached cautiously, asking her to stop, reminding her that this was private property. Karen barely acknowledged the request, insisting she had a right to make the changes. The tension in the neighborhood grew. People started noticing the conflict, and whispers spread quickly. Some neighbors took sides, while others avoided the situation entirely. The homeowner didn't want gossip to dominate the story. They just wanted their dock to be left alone. But Karen's actions made that impossible. Every time someone passed by, she would gesture toward the dock and explain her ownership, making it sound official and unquestionable. One evening, after a particularly long day of Karen's presence, the homeowner sat on the dock feeling exhausted. They watched the sun sink behind the trees, the sky painted with shades of orange and pink, and tried to find calm amidst the chaos. This had always been a place of peace, a refuge from the demands of life. Now it felt like a stage for someone else's drama, and the homeowner felt powerless. But as they sat there, they realized something important. This dock was not just about property lines or legal documents. It was about life, about memories, about a sense of belonging. Karen could try to claim it, she could make threats, but she couldn't erase the years of history tied to that place. That thought gave the homeowner a renewed sense of determination. They wouldn't be intimidated. They would stand their ground. The next day, the homeowner took action. They contacted the local property office and requested the official surveys and records for their land. They asked for any historical maps that could prove the dock had been part of their property for decades. They also started creating a timeline of the dock's history, noting every significant event, every family gathering, and every time neighbors had used the dock with permission. This timeline became a powerful tool, a way to show not only legal ownership but the community recognition of that ownership. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior escalated. She began showing up at the dock with tools, sometimes making minor alterations, sometimes leaving notes claiming repairs were needed. She even put up a small sign that said private property with her name on it. The homeowner removed it politely each time, explaining that it was their property. Each removal was a quiet assertion of their rights, a reminder that they would not back down. The neighborhood became a silent audience to the ongoing drama. Some people sympathized with the homeowner, quietly expressing support or offering advice. Others were cautious, not wanting to get involved with Karen's confrontational nature. The homeowner learned to navigate this delicate balance, seeking allies without escalating tensions unnecessarily. They realized that patience and careful planning were essential. One afternoon, as the homeowner was walking along the shoreline, they noticed Karen standing at the edge of the dock, talking to a friend in a loud voice. The friend seemed hesitant, glancing at the homeowner nervously while Karen continued to insist that the dock was hers. The homeowner decided to intervene, calmly approaching and asking to speak privately. "Karen," they said, keeping their voice steady, "I understand that you feel strongly about this, but the dock belongs to my property. I have records, photographs, and neighbors who can confirm this. I want to resolve this peacefully. Can we talk?" Karen shook her head, dismissing the offer. "There's nothing to talk about. The dock is mine, and I will continue to use it. You can't stop me." It was frustrating, but the homeowner knew that confrontation alone wouldn't solve the problem. They had to think strategically. Legal action might be necessary if Karen refused to listen, but they also wanted to avoid unnecessary conflict. Over the next few days, they focused on strengthening their position, gathering more evidence, documenting Karen's actions, and keeping a clear record of everything that happened. During this time, the homeowner also reflected on the nature of disputes like this. They realized that some people, like Karen, were more interested in asserting power than finding truth. Arguments based on logic and evidence often fell on deaf ears when someone was determined to believe their own version of reality. The homeowner knew they couldn't change Karen, but they could protect their property and their peace of mind. As the week turned into a month, the homeowner noticed a subtle shift. Karen's visits became less frequent, though still unpredictable. She continued to assert her claims, but the homeowner's calm persistence and careful documentation seemed to create a barrier. Karen could not claim ignorance of the homeowner's position, and the homeowner had shown that they were prepared to defend their dock without resorting to hostility. Sitting on the dock one evening, watching the reflection of the moon on the water, the homeowner felt a quiet satisfaction. The situation was far from resolved, but they had not been intimidated. They had protected their memories, their history, and their sanctuary. And while Karen's presence was still a source of tension, the homeowner knew that patience, preparation, and persistence were their strongest tools. The conflict had already begun to teach lessons that went beyond property rights. The homeowner learned the importance of standing firm, of documenting and proving one's position, and of navigating difficult people with a mix of assertiveness and calm. They understood that peace was not the absence of conflict, but the ability to maintain control and dignity in the face of it. And so, as the lake reflected the last light of the day, the homeowner sat quietly, feeling a sense of readiness. Karen had made her claim, and the neighborhood had taken notice. But the dock, the memories, and the history belonged to the homeowner. They would continue to defend it, not with anger or aggression, but with patience, evidence, and unwavering resolve. The battle had escalated, and the real challenge was only beginning. But the homeowner was determined to see it through, protecting not just wood and nails, but a piece of life that could never truly be taken away. The tension had been building for weeks, and the homeowner could feel it in every step they took toward the dock. Each morning, the sun rose over the lake as if nothing had changed, its light shimmering across the calm water. But the dock, once a place of peace and quiet, now carried the weight of confrontation. Every plank, every railing, every familiar corner had become a silent witness to Karen's relentless assertions. That morning, as the homeowner approached, they noticed Karen already at the dock. She was standing near the end, clipboard in hand, scribbling notes and occasionally glancing toward the road as if expecting someone else to arrive. Her presence was unnerving, but the homeowner reminded themselves that fear or hesitation would only give her more power. They had to stay calm, steady, and focused. "Karen," the homeowner said, keeping their voice even, "I need to speak with you." Karen looked up, her expression sharp. "What now?" she asked, her tone clipped. "I've brought everything," the homeowner said, holding out a folder filled with maps, photographs, and documents. "I want to show you clearly that this dock has been part of my property for decades. Let's review it together. Maybe then we can find a solution that works for both of us." Karen's eyes narrowed. "I don't need to see anything. You're just going to waste my time." The homeowner sighed but didn't back down. "This isn't a waste of time. This is about the truth and about protecting what's rightfully mine. I'm willing to be fair, but I need you to at least listen." Karen hesitated for a moment as if weighing her options. Then, without responding, she continued to scribble on her clipboard, ignoring the homeowner completely. That silence, deliberate and frustrating, was Karen's way of asserting control. But the homeowner knew something important. They couldn't let frustration dictate their actions. They had to act strategically. Over the next several days, the homeowner focused on strengthening their case. They visited the local property office multiple times, gathering copies of historical surveys and land records. They spoke with older neighbors who had lived in the area for decades, collecting stories and confirmations of the dock's existence long before Karen arrived. Each piece of evidence became a small brick in a wall of proof, something they could rely on if the situation escalated further. Meanwhile, Karen's behavior began to shift slightly. She seemed to sense that the homeowner was serious, that they had the support and documentation to back up their claims. She started coming to the dock less frequently, though her visits were unpredictable and sometimes aggressive. She would pace the dock, take measurements, and occasionally shout across the water, asserting her ownership as if sheer volume could make it real. One afternoon, the homeowner decided to take a more direct approach. They invited Karen to sit down and review the documents together. Surprisingly, she agreed, perhaps curious or perhaps wanting to assert control over the situation. They spread the papers across the dock, old maps and photographs showing the dock's construction and usage over decades. The homeowner walked Karen through each piece of evidence calmly, explaining the dates, the events, and the witnesses who could confirm the history. For a moment, Karen looked uncertain. The homeowner noticed the subtle change, the way she paused, the slight hesitation in her voice. It was the first crack in the armor of confidence she had built around herself. I'm not sure this proves anything," she muttered, still trying to maintain her stance. The homeowner remained calm. "It doesn't just prove ownership. It proves history, community recognition, and fairness. This dock has been part of my life for years, and I'm asking you to acknowledge that." Karen shifted uncomfortably. She was used to having control, used to bending situations to her favor. But now she faced someone who had prepared, someone who could show evidence beyond doubt. The homeowner continued, presenting witness statements and old photographs of family gatherings. Each piece reinforced the truth that Karen could not simply ignore. After a long pause, Karen finally spoke, her voice lower and less certain. Maybe it isn't entirely mine." The homeowner saw the moment for what it was, a turning point. They didn't push, didn't gloat. Instead, they remained steady, giving her space to process. "Acknowledging the truth isn't a defeat," they said gently. "It's an opportunity to find a fair solution." Over the next few days, discussions began to change. Karen was no longer as aggressive. She still maintained her claim at times, but she seemed more open to negotiation. The homeowner realized that there was an opportunity to resolve the conflict without escalating to legal action. They began to consider a practical approach. If Karen truly wanted access to the dock, there could be a way for both parties to benefit. One evening, as the sun set over the water, the homeowner approached Karen with a new idea. "Karen, I know you enjoy the dock, and I'm willing to find a solution that works for both of us. If you want to use the dock occasionally, we can arrange a fair agreement. You could contribute for its use, and I would maintain it for both of us." Karen's reaction was surprising. She paused, clearly caught off guard by the proposal. Her expression softened slightly, and for the first time she seemed to consider the possibility of compromise. You mean pay to use it?" she asked. "Yes," the homeowner replied. "That way you get access when you want it, and I'm compensated for maintenance and permission. It's fair and practical." Karen didn't respond immediately. She looked at the water, at the dock that had been the center of conflict for weeks, and then back at the homeowner. Finally, she nodded slowly. Maybe that could work. It was a moment of relief. The homeowner didn't celebrate prematurely, knowing that negotiations still had to be finalized, but it was the first sign that resolution was possible. They agreed to set up clear terms, specific hours for use, fair compensation, and mutual respect for boundaries. Both parties understood that the dock could no longer be a battleground, but instead could function as a shared resource under agreed rules. The days following the agreement were quiet, but not without effort. The homeowner carefully drafted the terms, making sure everything was clear, fair, and documented. They included details about maintenance, usage schedules, and responsibilities. Karen, while hesitant at first, reviewed the terms and agreed. Both parties signed the informal arrangement, a document that marked a new phase in their relationship with the dock. With the agreement in place, the tension eased. Karen no longer arrived unannounced, and the homeowner could enjoy the dock without constant anxiety. The community noticed the change as well. Neighbors who had watched the dispute unfold began to relax, seeing that the conflict had been resolved peacefully. The homeowner realized that the battle had not been about winning or losing, but about finding a solution that respected both parties' needs. Sitting on the dock one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, the homeowner reflected on the journey. What had started as a confrontation had evolved into a lesson about patience, negotiation, and the power of evidence. They had learned that some people are driven by control, but even the most stubborn individuals can find common ground when approached with calm, preparation, and fairness. The dock returned to being a place of peace. The water reflected the colors of the sky, and the homeowner could hear the familiar sounds of birds and wind through the trees. The memories tied to the dock, the family gatherings, the quiet mornings and evenings spent watching the sunset, all of it remained intact. The battle had not erased those moments. It had reinforced their value. Karen still used the dock from time to time, but now it was under clear terms. The homeowner didn't resent her presence. Instead, they saw it as a practical arrangement that allowed both parties to coexist peacefully. The agreement also served as a reminder that even in conflict, compromise could create solutions that were fair and sustainable. Over the next few weeks, the homeowner continued to document the arrangement, keeping records of usage and payments. They also stayed vigilant, knowing that agreements sometimes need reinforcement, but the stress that had once dominated their mornings had lessened significantly. They could once again enjoy the dock for its intended purpose: reflection, relaxation, and connection with nature. The turning point had been the homeowner's ability to remain calm, gather evidence, and propose a practical solution. By focusing on facts and fairness rather than anger, they were able to transform a potential legal battle into an opportunity for compromise. The dock, which had once been a source of tension and anxiety, had become a symbol of resilience, patience, and thoughtful negotiation. And so the story of the dock moved from confrontation to cautious cooperation. The homeowner had learned that standing one's ground doesn't always mean escalating conflict. Sometimes it means preparing thoroughly, remaining patient, and finding a path that allows both sides to coexist. The dock remained theirs. Their memories remained intact. And even Karen's occasional presence no longer threatened the peace of the lake. The homeowner looked out over the water, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. The sun set behind the trees, casting long shadows and turning the lake into a mirror of gold and pink. The battle for the dock had reached a turning point, and while challenges might arise in the future, the homeowner knew they had the tools to handle them. Patience, preparation, and fairness had won the day, transforming. The days after the agreement brought a surprising sense of calm. For the first time in weeks, the homeowner could walk down to the dock without a knot of tension in their stomach. The lake shimmered in the morning light, the gentle lapping of water against the wooden planks bringing back a sense of peace that had been missing for so long. The dock was theirs again, not just in ownership but in spirit. Even with Karen using it occasionally, the fear and frustration that had haunted their mornings began to fade. Karen followed the rules. She arrived at the dock at the times they had agreed upon, and she respected the boundaries set in the arrangement. At first it felt strange to see her there peacefully, as if the previous weeks of conflict had never happened. She didn't speak much, only nodding or waving politely when the homeowner approached. The tension had shifted from confrontation to a quiet, businesslike coexistence. The homeowner found themselves watching Karen closely at first, still wary of sudden aggression or claims. But with each passing day, it became clear that the agreement was holding. She wasn't attempting to assert ownership anymore, and she followed the usage schedule faithfully. The homeowner realized that sometimes people simply need structure and clarity to change their behavior. Karen had been aggressive because there was no clear framework before. Now that there was, her energy shifted. Life at the lake returned to a more normal rhythm. The homeowner began using the dock for fishing again, enjoying quiet mornings with a cup of coffee and the rising sun reflecting off the water. They could finally feel the sense of ownership, not just legally but emotionally. It wasn't about being right anymore. It was about reclaiming their sanctuary and restoring peace to their life. Karen's presence became less of a disruption and more of a reminder of the negotiation that had taken place. She would arrive with her fishing gear or a small chair, sometimes chatting quietly about mundane things like the weather or the state of the lake. Slowly, she became less of a threat and more of a neighbor who occasionally shared the dock. The homeowner didn't need to like her, but they respected the fact that she was following the rules and no longer challenging their ownership. Interestingly, the agreement also changed the way neighbors interacted. Some of them had been cautious during the conflict, avoiding the homeowner or Karen to prevent being dragged into the dispute. Now they returned to the dock area more freely, enjoying the lake without tension in the air. Children played safely by the water, friends gathered for quiet picnics, and the homeowner noticed small smiles and waves from people who had once been hesitant to approach. The dock was no longer a battleground but a place for community connection. One afternoon, as the homeowner was sitting at the edge of the dock, dangling their feet in the water, Karen approached. She carried a small envelope in her hand. "Here's the payment for this week," she said quietly, handing it over. The homeowner accepted it without comment, a simple nod acknowledging that the arrangement was working. Karen walked to the end of the dock and set up her chair, quietly fishing without disrupting anyone else. The homeowner reflected on how strange it was to think that just a few weeks ago, they had been arguing fiercely, raising voices, and fearing that the dock might be lost forever. Now it was a different kind of relationship, one built on rules, respect, and a shared understanding of boundaries. The dock had been reclaimed, but the real victory was the peace that had returned. Despite the calm, the homeowner remained vigilant. They continued to keep a record of all interactions and payments, not out of mistrust but to ensure that the arrangement remained fair. Documentation had been key in the earlier conflict, and it continued to provide security. Every photograph, note, and signed record served as a reminder that clarity and preparedness were powerful tools. Over time, Karen even showed a subtle change in attitude. She no longer arrived with the same aggressive posture or demands. She followed the schedule without complaints and occasionally offered small gestures of acknowledgement, like thanking the homeowner for maintaining the dock or commenting on the beauty of the lake. It wasn't friendship, but it was coexistence, a term that the homeowner realized was enough. The homeowner began to notice something unexpected. The arrangement created small opportunities for positive interaction. On one occasion, a sudden rainstorm caught both of them at the dock. Instead of the usual tension, they helped each other secure chairs, fishing gear, and small items to prevent them from being swept into the water. In that shared moment, the homeowner realized that conflict doesn't always have to dominate a relationship. Even past adversaries can cooperate when circumstances require it. The dock itself seemed to reflect the change. What had been a place marked by stress and tension became a site of calm and order once again. The wood, weathered and familiar, carried the weight of history and the promise of peace. Every morning, the homeowner felt a sense of gratitude for having persevered, for having stood firm and negotiated wisely, rather than letting anger dictate their actions. The dock was theirs in every meaningful sense. Neighbors began to notice the change too. The initial whispers of gossip and curiosity slowly gave way to respect. Some approached the homeowner quietly, expressing admiration for the way the situation had been handled. They didn't ask about the details, but they acknowledged the homeowner's patience, preparation, and fairness. The conflict that had once divided the neighborhood now served as an example of how even difficult disputes could be resolved with calm determination. The homeowner also reflected on personal growth. They had learned lessons about patience, diplomacy, and resilience. Karen's aggression had tested their limits, forcing them to stay calm under pressure and think strategically. They had learned to document thoroughly, communicate clearly, and remain firm without escalating conflict unnecessarily. The experience left them more confident in handling difficult situations, not just with Karen, but in life in general. Karen's behavior continued to improve gradually. She no longer arrived with a confrontational attitude or tried to assert imaginary rights. Instead, she followed the agreed schedule, paid for the dock's use, and even engaged in small, polite conversations from time to time. While the homeowner didn't necessarily trust her fully, they recognized that behavior had shifted. Rules, boundaries, and consistency had created a framework for peaceful coexistence. One evening, as the homeowner watched the sun set over the lake, Karen waved from her chair at the far end of the dock. The homeowner waved back, a simple gesture of acknowledgement. It was remarkable to consider how much had changed. The dock had gone from a source of stress and frustration to a place where both parties could enjoy the water without conflict. It wasn't perfect, but it worked. The homeowner also noticed a subtle change in themselves. They no longer felt the same anxiety when approaching the dock. Their mornings were once filled with dread, but now they felt anticipation and excitement for quiet moments by the water. The conflict had tested their patience, but it had also strengthened their appreciation for the dock and what it represented. Every sunrise, every ripple in the water, and every bird song became reminders of why the fight had been worth it. Karen, too, seemed to adjust to the new reality. She no longer attempted to dominate or control the dock. Instead, she followed the rules, respected boundaries, and even offered small signs of courtesy. While the homeowner remained cautious, they recognized that the agreement had created a workable solution. Coexistence was possible, and in this case, it had been achieved through clear communication, documented agreements, and the willingness to find compromise. As weeks turned into months, the arrangement became routine. Karen continued to pay for her usage. The homeowner maintained the dock carefully, and both could enjoy the lake without the constant stress of conflict. The initial tension faded into a distant memory, replaced by a cautious but functional peace. The homeowner often reflected on how much had been learned through the experience. They realized that conflict is rarely about simple right or wrong. It is about people, emotions, and the willingness to communicate and compromise. Karen had been stubborn, aggressive, and demanding, but the homeowner's calm, prepared, and fair approach had transformed the situation. What had begun as a battle over ownership had ended with a practical solution that preserved dignity, peace, and a shared resource. Even the dock itself seemed different now. The wood, weathered from years of use, carried new significance. It was a symbol of resilience, compromise, and careful negotiation. It represented the homeowner's determination, patience, and ability to navigate difficult situations successfully. Each morning they stepped onto it. They were reminded of the journey from confrontation to coexistence and the lessons learned along the way. The homeowner also noticed that the experience had ripple effects beyond the dock. Their approach to conflict in other areas of life had changed. They were more patient, more strategic, and more aware of the value of preparation and evidence. The dock had been a teacher, showing that even the most stubborn obstacles could be managed with calm, fairness, and persistence. In the end, the dock had been reclaimed not through anger or force, but through careful planning, clear communication, and practical compromise. Karen had not disappeared, but she had adapted, and the